Hi there, it's me, your teacher, down here in the corner. I'm here doing a short little introduction video for you to help situate where we're heading in the class now that you have finished exam number 1 and project number 1. So I wanted to sort of set the direction for the next phase of the course. And we'll go back to the very beginning to help situate you on where we are now, and that is, of course, this class is a course on assessment. Assessment being defined as formally measuring the status of students with respect to educational variables of interest. So in exam number 1, I had some variables of interest that I was measuring with those items. And although technically they were pretty well designed items, I think that for those of you that did not perform as well as you wanted to, you probably could have used a little more practice with feedback. That's usually the issues with not performing as well on an assessment as you had hoped. If you recall from the beginning of class, teachers tend to formally assess learners at 3 important phases within the overall pageant of teaching and learning, and that includes the introduction, where you might pre-test students either formally or in some cases informally, as far as questioning and sensing. You know, sometimes it's the kind of feedback that you get from students is just in their faces and in how well they attend to what you're saying and how they respond to what you're saying. Then, of course, the practice and feedback loop. That is a definite time to formally assess learning as it's happening. And then the terminal assessment at the end of the learning experience, where hopefully what you're measuring is actual levels of learning, if that is what you're measuring, whether it's skills, knowledge, or attitudes. So in this particular class, so far for part 1, we focused on, first of all, what are instructional outcomes and how do you refine an outcome in order for it to be something that communicates what you expect learners to be able to do forever as a result of a learning experience. Some of you had some difficulty with this on the exam. I threw what I thought was a softball as far as giving you an outcome to revise that used the word understand, and I might not have made it as clear in the notes as I should have about the fact that the word understand is a very difficult word to have in an outcome, because it doesn't communicate clearly what learners will be able to do. And that's really key to be able to design good assessment items. You need to be able to know clearly what the learners should be able to do when they get to the point in the learning experience where you want to assess their status. So we looked at outcomes, and then we looked at the first or the main characteristics of what makes assessment items good at measuring status. And so we focused on the big 3 characteristics, and that is reliability, validity, and absence of bias. So the first part of this class focused kind of on assessments in a general sense. Your first project had to do with sort of examining or analyzing in a real basic way a formal assessment that exists in the world and that is used by people in various situations in order to measure the status of people with respect to the variables of interest. And so rather than look at issues of reliability and validity, you were asked just to reflect on some general questions about what you think the assessments were designed to measure, how they were used, and whether or not you felt they were designed well enough to be able to serve the purpose of what their intentions were. And those are really broad, general things that are really important to consider when you think about assessments. But now we're going to head into part 2 of the class, where you're going to start getting very concrete about assessments, and you are going to focus on the most valuable aspect of this entire class and where part 1 was leading you towards, and that is to be able to analyze existing assessments. That's what project number 2 is going to be for you. Take an existing assessment, whether it's one you find online from a textbook company, or maybe one that you created yourself in another course, or when you were doing field experience, or in your own practice as an educator right now. Sometimes it's really good to take a hard, close look at the assessments that you develop in order to try and determine whether or not they follow the rules. And so the rule book that you've been given for this class constitutes really the majority of what you need to focus on for part 2. There are, however, some general concepts that kind of go along with using the rules to develop good assessments, and you're going to be focusing on some of those general concepts as well. One of them is to look at how you can use the rules to improve existing assessments. And you'll be looking at judgmental versus empirical ways to implement improvement strategies. And if you are going to use empirical assessments, that is, you are going to look at data. That, by the way, is part 3 of the class in terms of you doing your project. You'll be collecting data and using the data you collect to determine whether or not the items function the way you would hope they would. But this is going to sort of lay the foundation for that by having you examine some of the common ways that educators or assessment experts use fundamental data about testing in order to make improvements. Again, you'll be looking at some concepts related to formative versus summative assessments and how those are used differently by educators. And then the final sort of general concept you'll be investigating in part 2 are norm reference versus criterion reference assessments, and how they're different, and how the data you collect when you implement them can be used differently as you focus on improving the quality of specific assessment items. And that really is the whole point of part 2 of this class. And that's what makes it so valuable for you as educators, because it focuses on your ability or abilities to do a really good job at creating really good assessments, or identifying good ones when you see them, and identifying some bad ones when you see them. And speaking of which, just to sort of introduce the whole idea of the rules for good assessment, I have a collection on my computer of some existing assessment items, and I don't even really know where I got them, but they're out there in the world, and I have a couple right now I'm going to show you that demonstrates the sort of the poor rules. Item number 15 is taken from a driver's test, and if you can read that, I hope you can. You'll notice that that C, item C here. Let me get a little highlighter here. For item 15, choice number C, your red traffic signal changes to green while a pedestrian is crossing in your lane. You should, and you have 3 choices: give the right of way, give the right to the pedestrian, give the right of way to the left turning vehicle, run the pedestrian down, and then beep loudly, and then proceed. Well, hopefully obviously to you, item C is an obvious wrong answer. And even though it adds a bit of levity to the test, because the learners can automatically eliminate that from the choice. Now, if they don't know the correct answer, it's now whittled down to a 1 in 3 chance of getting it right, even if they don't know the right answer. So that would be a type 1 error, a false positive on that. So it's important to follow that rule. Another really important rule that gets violated a lot by teachers is writing items that are either unclear, the directions are unclear, or there's a language bias that makes some learners interpret the directions differently. And I just love this one. In your opinion, which location would be the most dangerous during a tornado? And because the choices in school, at a park, or in a store, because those choices are all written in the same font with the same weight in terms of bolding and size as the directions, one part of the directions, circle 1, this person thought that would be the most dangerous location during a tornado. And I love the explanation. But again, if you wanted to measure whether or not the students could pick a correct answer from the three, then this particular learner, you don't know whether they can do what you want them to do. Although I think from their explanation they can. By the way, I'm not exactly sure which is the right answer. And also because they said in your opinion, then none of these, then all of these might be correct for various reasons. So I thought that was kind of a funny one. Here's one I like. Again, it has directions that may not be well understood by all learners. Write the following words in alphabetical order, and so you'll notice what they did is they took the word pumpkin here and they wrote it with all the letters in alphabetical order from the word pumpkin, and they did that for all of them. And what I find interesting about this is that if you were trying to measure whether or not they understood the concept of alphabetical order, then I would have to say that they got 100% correct on this. Interesting. Another rule you're going to learn about is making sure that your graphics are absolutely clear when you're communicating an item. And you see this all the time in worksheets that are developed by textbook companies especially, or that you might get online on Pinterest. Apparently the students are supposed to be able to take this particular graphic right here and write an equation for a math equation for it. And they wrote 6 minus 4 equals 2. And the teacher goes and corrects them and says, no, it's 10 minus 6 equals 4. And I have no idea who is right here. I think the student is right, because these little tiny lines right here indicate that these apples are falling. And I think from this image right here that means that this apple fell out of the tree, and these are all falling apples. And so we had 6, and then 4 of them fell out, and we ended up with 2. Again, from a mathematical perspective, I would imagine that this learner probably understands the concepts and can demonstrate basic subtraction if that's what the item was supposed to be measuring. But the fact that it was corrected by the teacher to be something that is, to me, just as abstract is just shows you that this was not a good image to use. It's not clear. And I think this is my last one. Again, a language bias here. These are short answer responses. America is located on this continent, and they wrote, it is, and they got it wrong. And if the student who wrote this was in North America, which they probably were, not necessarily, but they probably were, then technically this would be a right answer if that's how they read this question, this item. This is sort of a funny demonstration of a language bias. And so if I were analyzing this test, I would look at that item and say that it could be reworded to make it more clear, so that if you're looking for the answer in North America, which, by the way, you're sort of cued by using the word America, they probably should say the United States. The contiguous United States, I suppose, because if you think about it, not all Hawaii technically isn't located in North America, so it gets complicated. But it's important to be absolutely clear, and that is one of the important messages that you're going to be communicating. In project number 2, you're going to be looking at existing assessment items, either ones that you made or ones that you have located, and you're going to be analyzing them kind of in the same way that I just sort of walked through some of those obvious ones. And it's a fun assignment, and something that is an assignment that you will do as a professional educator, if not every day of your job, at least every week of your job. So I hope you enjoy part 2. It's very relevant, and I hope this introduction to part 2 will help situate you into what's coming next.